Hello, I'm Wendy Williams, owner and founder of Williams Educational Consultants. I help families with educational needs for students kindergarten through graduate school. With over 350 college visits and 1,000 plus clients, I have had the distinct pleasure of working with some fantastic colleagues. One in particular is Dr. Maggie Wray, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Maggie, a certified ADHD coach and academic life coach. Her company's official name is Creating Positive Futures. So Maggie, welcome. Thank you so much for joining.
It's my pleasure. I'm really excited to be here. This will be fun.
Well, tell me a little bit first about your company, if you don't mind.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So we do academic and ADHD coaching for middle school, high school, and college students. And we do work with a couple grad students as well. So we really focus on helping students find ways to earn better grades with less stress by improving their organization, time management, and study skills.
And I can say from experience, some of my clients who have used you have had nothing but positive things to say. They've always been very happy and they learn a lot. So I'm going to just dive on it because we have a lot to talk about.
Yes, we do.
So tell me, what are some of the biggest challenges students have encountered with the shift to online hybrid learning?
Oh my gosh, there are so many. Where to even start? So I think it's been really stressful for a lot of students and families just because it's all so unfamiliar. I know we got a little bit of a taste of it in the spring, but this is the first time we've really headed into a whole new school year in this strange new online/hybrid environment. And so I think that's just the stress of the unknown is a lot for kids and for families to deal with. And then it's especially challenging for a number of reasons to be doing school entirely online. So for one reason, it's very different to get instructions in written format versus verbally. A lot of kids are used to reminders from their teachers. They'll go into class and their teacher will tell them they've got homework. If these teachers are dealing with less instruction time, they're going to tend to put more of those instructions in a written format. So you've got to really pay attention. You've got to read all the announcements. You've got to read your email. How many kids are not even checking their emails? So there's a lot of opportunity for things to get missed or fall through the cracks. And so it's really important to be proactive and to making sure that there is a great connection with the teachers because there is less support from them during this time. And they're also really overwhelmed by the transition to this whole new format of learning. And so the teachers aren't necessarily as on top of things as they would like to be, and some things can get missed. So it's putting a lot more ownership on the students and on the parents to be really proactive and on top of that. And there's also less accountability from the teachers as well, because some of these things are getting submitted online versus handed in. You're not going to want to show up to class and not hand in a paper. But if it's just submitted online, some kids can miss that, or they think they submitted it, but it didn't go through. And so there's all these opportunities for things to get missed. And there's just so much less structure as well, because they're doing some of them these online days where they'll just be online all day. Or they might be watching video classes. Especially for a college kid, this is happening a lot where it's asynchronous completely and they're just on their own time, watch their videos whenever. And so it's very easy to procrastinate, to push that off, to not take it seriously. It's harder to get motivated. And it's just a very different learning format than most kids are used to. And so a lot of them have been struggling with it quite a bit.
And I think most students in general have a harder time learning virtually or online. I mean, studies do indicate that it can be very hard for students overall to do a virtual learning experience. So I can only imagine how difficult it is for students with underlying learning differences like ADHD or executive functioning, or they have a cognitive process delay. So what are some of the steps that you are suggesting kids take to manage that online platform?
Sure. So there's a couple things to keep in mind. One is, just as you mentioned, online learning is a lot harder than in-person learning. So if whatever we can do to make online learning feel a little bit more like in-person learning is going to help. So one of those things is when you've got school, you have structure in your day. So you're waking up, you're getting dressed in real clothes, you're going to a physical place where you're going to go learn. And so creating some level of structure, even if they've got a very unstructured day, can be really helpful. So even if it's a day where they're not logging in online to do anything with their teachers, if they can try to maintain some semblance of a normal schedule where they're getting up like normal, they're, eating an actual meal, they're sitting at an actual desk, they have a steady space that's away from their normal, like their bed. A lot of kids were doing these online classes in their bed in the spring, which was a disaster. They would fall back asleep. It was a mess. And some schools have just said that's not even allowed. And so that's helping because the schools are putting some constraints on that. But the more that students can almost think of this is like my school day. It's almost like a separate part of my house. It's a separate mindset that I'm in completely. And then making sure that they ideally are filling that non-school time with other things that feel different from that. So I know a lot of kids have lost their extracurriculars, but the good news is this fall, some of those are coming back. So it might be different from what their normal extracurriculars might look like, but finding some ways to keep them busy, because the problem is if kids think, oh, I've got all day to do this work, then it's going to expand to fill the time that it has available. And so we almost need to help them create some level of constraint so that they feel like they're limited in the time that they can spend on things, and they actually have some level of urgency to get things done. And then hopefully also creating some level of accountability. So if they're getting less accountability from teachers because they're not live or they're not in person, that's a big part of just what we do as coaches anyway, is create accountability, but parents can do that as well. Teachers presumably are still going to be posting grades on grade portals. The good news about online classes is everything is posted online. It has to be. So it's a lot easier to check. Your kid can't say, oh, I turned that in. Well, here's the submit section. It doesn't look like it's turned in. Maybe let's get that submitted now. So you can actually follow up with them to see if things got done. Obviously, some kids may need more of that versus less of that. The way I think of structure and accountability is we need to create as much of that externally as they need to be successful, but not more. You don't want to micromanage it. You don't want to make them feel like you're always on their back or you're always hovering over them. But if you know that they're a kid who's been missing assignments, who things have been falling through the cracks, then not checking in is just going to create more stress for you and for them, because you don't know if they're on top of it, and they probably aren't. So
right. I know as a consultant, one of the things that I have been working on with my clients is telling them, I know you're not used to checking your email 100% of the time. So maybe start reminders in the morning and in the evening to set an alarm and check that email. And when I was doing this, I thought to myself, that's pretty genius, because as a consultant, and I'm sure you with your own company too, we're constantly checking emails, right? As soon as it goes off, we're just kind of used to it. So it's second nature. But I think even for parents and for, others that are constantly checking their emails, to set time aside and say, okay, let's do it in the morning or, afternoon check, but not all day, is a healthier way of living.
Well, and so for some kids, it's actually, they need to move the opposite direction. They don't check it for 2 days and they'll miss things. And even college students, you'd think they'd be on top of it, but they're often not, and they won't check their emails. And so sometimes for some kids we're coaching, we'll actually build that into their coaching sessions. And okay, let's check the email. Let's make sure that we've got everything cleared out. A lot of kids have no idea that archiving emails is a thing. So they've got thousands of emails just sitting in their inbox. They also don't know how to respond to emails, which is really interesting. So some training is helpful there. I know as a parent or as an adult, it may feel like, well, of course you just write back. How hard is it? But it actually is really hard if you're not used to it. And kids haven't really learned how to write back to an email. So I'll see kids all the time write, hey, where is my assignment, or something like that, which is not how you communicate with the teacher. And they don't know. They're writing it like a text. It's like a text message. And so they don't really realize that it is not the way to communicate. And so if they get taught, or if they get shown how to do it, then they understand. There's a funny article I like to sometimes share with our kids, is how to email your professor without being annoying. It was written by a professor. And so you can look it up if you'd like to, but there's
absolutely will.
Some funny tips in there about just basic ways to create an email. And sometimes that will help reduce the overwhelm as well, as they're not responding because they don't know what to say, or they don't know how to get back to them. So they just avoid, or they feel like their email's filled with spam or filled with junk because they don't know how to filter things into folders or how to unsubscribe. So some email skills can be really helpful for kids, especially in this digital environment.
Absolutely. That's a great tip. So as we're talking about skill sets, how can we help them keep track of what they actually need to do?
Oh gosh, there's so many ways to handle that. So One thing that you just mentioned is kind of creating that routine for email. So I think similarly about checking for assignments. So some kids have different places they have to check. They might have 4 different teacher websites, and they've got a Google Classroom page, and they've got a Schoology page, and it just feels like going down the rabbit hole to like, okay, where am I? And then I've got a textbook page and all these different places that they have to look. So I like to try to centralize that if we can, and possibly put all of those into one bookmarks folder in their browser. If you don't know how to do that, just Google how to set up bookmarks folder in browser. So it's really a lot simpler if you can just put all those links in one place, and then you can right click on the bookmarks folder and say open all in tabs. So they need to get into a routine of just ideally one click, make it as easy as you can, so that they can check all their websites for all their inputs. Or if they want to, they can make themselves a checklist and print that out or put it on their computer. But basically they need some sort of reminder about all the places to check, because there are a lot. And I've seen so many times where kids they'll check all of them except this one site, and then they miss the updates on that one site. And this teacher is saying, why haven't you turned in any of your IXLs? And the kid goes, I didn't know we had to do IXLs. And they just weren't looking at that website. So that's one piece of it, is making it easy to keep track of their websites and creating that routine to check them every single day, just like you said about checking email.
Right.
And then making sure that they have then a place to centralize, gather all that information, because they could check it, but then what if they forget? Because a lot of times, especially for kids who have any sort of executive functioning challenge, poor working memory is a component of that. And so they will think they're going to remember, but they don't actually remember. And even if you don't have any sort of learning difference, if you are just a totally neurotypical person, but you checked 10 different websites, you're going to forget one. So we've got to have some way to centralize. And sometimes kids will be more comfortable with a paper planner. Sometimes they would prefer more of an electronic format. Google Calendar is a great tool, for example, that kids can use to keep track of things. It really depends on the kid, though. Some of them are going to like a whiteboard on their wall. It really, talking about what are the pros and cons of different formats is super important. We always like to make sure we're not forcing kids into a particular system, and we're finding what's going to work for them, because they've got to use it. It's not just the setup. They have to actually like updating it every day, and they have to follow through with that. Right. But the idea is that that's something that's in their control. They are in charge of putting the things on it. They are in charge of what comes off of it. They can move things around, versus a teacher's website, or even something like a Canvas page where the teachers are posting and it's the calendar of due dates, but you don't know actually when you're planning to do the work. So that's a problem. And ideally, you want to have a student have charge or have control of when they want to do things, because that's how they can actually start to be more proactive about their plans.
Right, absolutely. Now, I know you and I both work with students in all age ranges. So when we kind of think about the younger kids versus, elementary, middle, and high school, and then you get to college, it's very different. It looks different. It feels different for those age groups. Their calendars are different. Their classroom presentations are different. So I have found that each one needs specific focus in different areas. What are you finding to be difficult in terms of the elementary years when it comes to virtual learning?
Oh gosh, that is very challenging. So in elementary, we usually start kind of, for our coaching, usually middle school and up. And so the elementary schoolers, what I'll often do is kind of give parents some tips about what they can do at home. They can also get, if they've got kids who have ADHD or any sort of difficulties at home with their executive functioning, they can get parent coaching for training on how to help parent your kid with ADHD. So, and I'm happy to share that resources for that as well. So in terms of ways to approach this for kids who are a little bit younger, the way I think of it is parents are almost learning to be coaches themselves, because kids have such a hard time following through with things at this age. You're almost trying to coach them through building some of these skills in their everyday environment. So number one thing, if you've got a younger student, is going to be, of course, setting up really good close relationships with their teacher, because the kid is not necessarily going to remember what they're supposed to do. They're not necessarily always even going to be honest about what they have to do. I finished my homework. No, you didn't. So you need to make sure that you've got a really good understanding of what they do need to do and have that good relationship with their teacher. And then try to be building, I almost think of it like matchmaking between the teacher and the student, where you're telling the student, oh, your teacher said all these great things about you. And then you're telling the teacher, oh, my student said such great things about you. And we're trying to just kind of get them on the same page, because that relationship is so key, especially when they're younger.
That's brilliant. That is brilliant right there.
It is literally like matchmaking. Like if you're trying to set some friends up together and you're telling them all the good things about each other, do the same thing with teachers and kids. So that's a huge, because if the kid loves their teacher, they're going to want to do a good job. Yes. And so that's going to make such a huge difference. So that's a piece of it. And that'll help them get the most that they can out of the school itself. The other piece is, of course, that focus and that attention, staying on task during the school day is so hard for a little kid like that. So if there's any way, you don't necessarily have to sit with them literally the entire time, but if there's any way to be near them, I think of it like being a body double. You're kind of like nearby, you're shadowing, like they can almost like mirror you, like they would copy you or mimic you. So if you're sitting working hard, they will sit and work hard near you. But it's going to be hard if they're in a room all by themselves with nobody as their anchor for them to stay on task. They may just get up and kind of walk around or do something else. So it's harder for a teacher to keep them on task as well if they're virtual and just on a screen. So that'll be important. And then obviously you can look for other ways to be supporting their development and their learning outside of the school day, because you might have a little bit of an abbreviated school day, especially if you're a little bit younger. And so looking for ways to, how do we build lessons, or how do we connect what they're learning to their everyday life? So, you know, if they're learning math skills, how do we maybe connect that to some things that we're going to go buy at the store as a family? And how do we, or maybe we connect it to cooking, and we're going to talk about fractions as we make a recipe or something like that while we're cooking. So anything you can do during the day to help them see the connection, because that's the other piece we lose when we're online, is the real world physicality of our learning. We don't necessarily get that from a virtual screen. So the more we can bring those kinds of real world applications of what they're learning into their day-to-day life, they can start to see, oh, that's why that's important that we just talked about that today.
Right. I think that the biggest classroom we have is outside. And so
yes,
those elementary and even the middle and high school students to get outside and, you know, take a walk with your child, play some basketball, bring back rope. I mean, there's so many fun things that if you have chalk and a, you know, pavement, we can really bring it to the outside world. So
I know that helps a lot. That actually helps a lot with, I just did a training on this recently for our parents group, and we were talking about the science of exercise in the brain. And when you do that kind of thing, and do that cardio exercise or those coordinated movements, just your physical movements, it actually does increase your ability to use your executive functioning parts of your brain to process new information. It helps build connections and reinforce learning in the brain. The one researcher who studies it kind of describes it as miracle grow for your brain is exercise. And so if you can get your kids out and running around, that is another thing they lose, of course, in the digital school day is PE. So I'm so glad you brought this up, because that activity component, even just getting up and physically moving between classes, to change classes, to walk to lunch, and I'm going to walk to art class, and I'm going to walk to PE, whatever you're doing. You don't even do that in a digital learning environment. So make sure they're actually moving, because sometimes kids will just, they have class and then they sit at their desk, and then they've got another class and they're just sitting all day long, and their brain will turn off. So making sure they're moving is key.
And then after they are done with their classrooms, they're going online and doing video games.
And sitting more, yes.
But they're still sitting and watching the screen. So, well, let me ask you, I know we're running out of time. How do you think that virtual learning will change the future when it comes to education? I know this is a little off topic, but do you think that it's going to impact the future in terms of our children and the way that they're taught?
That's a really good question. I think there's definitely a lot out there about, oh, is this going to change all education? Everything's going to be virtual in the future. Nobody's going to want to go to anything in person. I think because of all the things that we've just been talking about, right, virtual learning is not the cure-all. It's not the end-all be-all of how to learn. A lot of students are actually struggling to learn in this environment and finding that they just aren't feeling happy with the level of mastery of the content. I think that's, I mean, for some students, that is their biggest fear. And for some parents as well, is that they're just not going to have the educational experience that they would have had in person. They're not really going to master the material. They're not really going to learn anything this year. And I think that says a lot about what the value is of having that face-to-face connection, having that physical presence in a learning environment that is different from your home. So I don't think we've just got to the end of education as we know it, the end of the world as we know. Everyone's just going to stay inside their house and never leave and never want to learn in person again. I mean, we've seen it even with coaching, where some of our kids who could be virtual are wanting to come back in person, the ones who are in the Atlanta area,
Yes.
because it's just, you do get that different connection when you are face to face. Even if
True.
you have a mask on, you're still getting a different connection face to face. So I think will it impact education? Yes. Are people more comfortable with Zoom? Yes, they definitely are. People now understand. We always did coaching on Zoom even before the shutdown. And I would try to explain to parents, yes, we do virtual coaching. It's okay that you're out of state. It's okay that you can't drive your kid in person. We do Zoom meeting. Oh, Zoom meeting? What's that? I've never heard of that. Now everyone in the world has heard of Zoom meeting. I think there will be more opportunities for kids to get educations and learn in different ways. And hopefully it'll open up new options and new opportunities so that kids do have the freedom to learn online if they would like to and if that works for them. But I do think there are a lot of kids that are never going to have that be their most effective option. And so I do think we're still going to very much have the need for physical face-to-face instruction in the real world.
Yes. No, I agree. I absolutely agree. All right. So Maggie, tell our viewers how they can get in touch with you and give them some information about your email address and so forth.
Sure. So they can get in touch through email at maggie@creatingpositivefutures.com. And of course, they can always go to our website as well. It's just creatingpositivefutures.com. We have a blog on there. We have a download about how to help your kids with procrastination. I know parents are really struggling this year. So if you have any questions, I do parent calls as well, where we'll jump on and just talk through things. If you're thinking about whether coaching would be a good fit, I'm always happy to talk about that as well. And you can email me questions. I'm happy to get back to parents by email. We have a Facebook group where we do some video tips for parents, and that's free also, so you can join that too. So there's lots of resources. I definitely would be happy to help you all out in any way that I can, because I know this is a crazy year and we can all use all the support we can get.
Yes. All right, great. Well, before we go, I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
Tell me, how do you find joy in your daily life during this pandemic?
Oh, that's a great question. I think we've lost so much of our connection with people. And so that's the most fun part of my day. I mean, this interview that we're having right now, right? This is a highlight of my day. I love getting to connect with you and getting to talk with you and catch up. And it's not the same thing as going out to coffee or getting to lunch together, but it still brings a lot of joy. And so I think those opportunities that I get to connect, even if it's over the phone with a parent, or even if it's over Zoom with a student, or with somebody that I really enjoy talking with, this is the fun part for me. So I don't give up on those social connections just because you're virtual. You can still, I mean, I see people having like dinner parties on Zoom. They can get together and they can have virtual workout classes. You can jump on and everybody does their own workout from their own basement on Zoom. There's ways to do this that still allow us to connect and really feel like we're part of a bigger community and we're not just stuck all alone in our houses, socially isolated. So that's the part that brings me joy, is getting to connect with others.
Well, I am so happy we were able to connect today, and I will continue to send families and clients your way. I want to thank you again for spending time. This is Wendy Williams with Williams Educational Consultants, and if you need any information, please check out my website at williamseducational.com. Maggie, have a great day.
Thank you so much, Wendy.
Bye.
Bye.